Hello, I'm Dave Feinlieb, and this is Beyond the Shelf. This show is an open exploration of the people and process behind e-commerce. Through conversations with innovators in the space, we learn the stories of these leaders and their strategies for e-commerce success. You can find out more about how we're helping leading brands and retailers build content at scale and take advantage of our free content health audit at itsrapid.ai. My guest on today's show is Joe Gaudreau, co-founder and CEO of Lettuce Commerce. Joe is a longtime industry veteran and was an early, very early actually, first 20 employee of Salsify, the product experience management and syndication category leader. Joe has held leadership roles in worldwide customer success, commerce strategy, R&D, and corporate development, having most recently overseen Salsify's technology partner program prior to venturing out and starting his own company. Please enjoy my conversation with Joe Gaudreau. Joe, welcome to the show.
Dave, it's awesome to be here. Thanks so much for having me. This has been a big success for you. Is this episode 25?
Something like that. I'm starting to lose count, so I guess that's a good sign. We've had so many great guests, and I appreciate you taking the time to jump on and talk with me today.
I'm honored to be here. It's always fun to talk shop and talk e-commerce, but it's really fun to talk to you. We've known each other for a little bit now, and so this should be a lot of fun.
I'm looking forward to it. First off, tell me about the last name, Joe Gaudreau. I feel like there's maybe a international origin there.
Well, at some point, so it's French origin for sure. At some point, we actually dropped an X off the end of the name, and I feel like if we had Gaudreau with the X at the end of it, then it's a straight giveaway to the French origins. But the EAU, French Canadian, immigrated over and immigrated down into Massachusetts, where I was born and raised.
I love it. What a great backstory. Well, it's great to be talking with you. Would you take us back? How did you get your start in the space? And if you want to share it with us, what was your first job?
Oh, well, my first job had a ton to do with e-commerce. My first job was as a camp counselor for summer camps. No, I'm kidding. Obviously, that had nothing to do with e-commerce as my very first job as someone who was aspiring to be able to earn his own gas money as a 16-year-old to be able to drive back and forth to school and to sports and to all that fun stuff. But my start in the space is what I would definitely deem as non-traditional. So studied engineering for my undergraduate, got some amazing job offers coming out of school. One was to work at a big, established, well-known global organization. And the other offer was to start at a 5-person company that was trying to do something cool with sports technology. So naturally, I decided to go the startup route instead of the safe route. Spent 5 years working on some amazing technology that's used in professional sports leagues today. And at the end of that run, what was super interesting is while the technology was extremely successful, the total addressable market was pretty small. There's only so many professional sports teams, only so many collegiate sports teams. And so as I was starting to think about the next phase of my career, take all of that entrepreneurial grit and spirit and excitement and apply that to a startup on the Boston tech scene, I had 2 keywords that I was searching for. And they were e-commerce and SaaS. And this was back in 2013, 2012. And so this was what turned out to be the right search terms at the right time for what is now just what, every organization is trying to understand.
This ability to pick the right search terms, some people call it having a vision of what might happen in the future. Where does that come from? How do you see that thing that's on the horizon and know what to look for?
It's for me, it's just kind of always being aware to what happens in your day to day. It's not necessarily what you're reading in the news or what you're seeing on CNBC or what you're seeing as trends that are already established but starting to become mainstream, but it's what you see around you in your day to day. I mean, for me, right, I'm of the generation where when I learned about Facebook, it was the Facebook. And I didn't learn about it from media. I learned about it from a paper banner that was put up at my university. And so as an early adopter, even back of like what today is known as like this social media, conglomerate, at one point was a super small company. And so just paying attention to, kind of what's around you, what your habits are, what the habits of your friends are, what's new and cool and interesting, and just being inquisitive. That for me is just kind of how I've been able to, at least in that some of these scenarios, read the tea leaves a little bit.
Now, speaking of banners and finding things, I hear there's a pretty interesting story on how you landed the gig at Salsify.
Well, like anything, it's it's always it's funny in retrospect, but it's a little bit more appropriate when you think about the times. So I mentioned it was 2012, 2013. I was starting to look for what my next opportunity was going to be. And so where do you look for jobs? At that time, one of the best job boards in Boston was Craigslist. And so I actually found Salsify through Craigslist, found them through some other sources as well after that, applied for my first role. And what's really funny about that is, I don't know, maybe it was 5 or 6 years later, Salsify is an established company. I've been in a leadership role for a while, and we're sitting down with our people experience team. And they're sharing with the group, over the last 5 years, here's where we found candidates from. And at the very bottom, there's Craigslist as a source, and there's 2 people next to it. So I do want to say I was not the only one, but going back all the way in that time, it's always a funny story, especially in hindsight now.
It seems to have worked out okay for you and for Salsify. So all good things there.
Yep, they did not get a used kayak. They somehow found Joe Gaudreau through that means.
Exactly. Now, for our audience, many of our listeners know, of course, Salsify and the space, but would you take a minute and just talk about the space and some of the technology providers in it?
Yeah, I mean, the space that Salsify plays in is really all around content. And so my elevator pitch, still to this day, especially to non-technologists, is, hey, what was the last thing that you bought online? Whether, did you buy it on Amazon? Did you go to someone's, brand website? What was the last thing you bought? And, I'll always hear funny stories. It could be anything from a pallet of paper towels for someone's home to a new electronic device to something just super niche. And I'll then follow up and say, would you have bought that if there were no images? Well, probably not. Okay, would you have bought that if, you were trying to put this in your garage, but you didn't have the weights and the dimensions and you knew if it would fit or not? Well, probably not. And so what Salsify does is it helps brands collect all of the content that's necessary to build out world-class product detail pages all across the digital shelf. And so I was lucky enough to spend years going through the process of, at the time it was, how do you transform content into spreadsheets, to how do you build out direct connections, to how do you do this for in-store as well as online. And so it's been just absolutely amazing to see what was once a super manual process, to see technology built to help drive, global operations for some of the biggest companies in the world.
Now, you've had a great track and path, and perhaps a unique path, I would say, at Salsify before starting your current company, which we're going to talk about. But tell us about that path. You started out in customer success. What was that like? What was the journey? And how do you think about working with some of these big brands that you mentioned?
It's one of those things you don't realize. Sometimes you do not realize your passion until you experiment with what it could be. And so when I was actually first coming into Salsify, I was like, working with customers, is that customer support? Is that doing software configuration? Like what is that? Because I was super new to the tech scene, from that iteration of like, what are the normal roles and expected roles as at a software as a service company. And I started as not just, coming in to build customer success, but as a person and an individual contributor who was responsible for making sure that the software that customers purchased ultimately delivered the ROI that they expected, that it met their requirements, that it helped them meet their goals, whether it was for automation, whether it was for operational efficiencies, whether it was for driving sales growth. All of that is what customer success can be for a technology company. And what was really, for me special about that, and where I started to develop a real passion around that space in particular, is you get to have very open and honest conversations around where your customer's business is, where they're trying to go, and you get to be part of the team that's helping them get there. And that's just for me, in the early years doing that work and then spending a number of years building teams and hiring individuals that had shared that same passion, was helped really help Salsify become an established company that was known for excellent customer service, excellent customer success, and that the technology not only worked, but exceeded individuals' expectations.
Now, one of the teams you built at Salsify, Commerce Strategy, I believe now known as Value Engineering, is kind of a new initiative, a new way of doing business around customers and the vendor, the provider. Tell us a little about that. What does it mean? How did it come about?
When you're working at a technology company, you're working with a whole bunch of individuals. So I shared, my experience working from the outside in with customers. But from the inside out, I learned a very valuable lesson as it relates to sales early on. And the lesson that I learned was that if you're ever going to ask someone for $1, you need to be able to tell them how they'll get 3 back from making that investment. And so the thought behind value engineering was, how do you embed this motion of consultative, value-based selling into the entire customer journey? That's not just understanding what the ROI could be at the front. And, when everyone's super excited to adopt new technology, it's going to change our lives, it's going to change our business. But then measuring that along the way to what's called value realization, to when they want to do more business with you and they want to, you're their first call when they say, we have this new challenge. I mean, you and I have talked about this. Like it's a term, value engineering, but isn't that like a part of how you make product decisions at its rapid?
100%. 100%. Actually, I felt like you were pulling the words out of my mind, because you got to deliver value. You got to deliver more value than what they're investing. And then you've got to have this great empathy for the customer. And especially what you said around feeling like you're part of the customer's team. I believe that's when you really know that you're doing something good. You're doing something right for the customer. So yeah, beautifully said.
And it's so interesting, right? Because all this relates to working at a technology company. Just those different ways that we're describing having a truly customer centric organization, right? Like for me and my experience, especially as I shifted into R&D roles and shifted into corporate development roles, and now as an entrepreneur starting my own company, it's when you've demonstrated sincere empathy and you've delivered results that have built trust, you've earned the right to say, what other challenges do you have? And customers are always going to be closest to problems that you could never think up on your own, because you're not living in their shoes every day. And so all of this focus around customer centricity is what can help build and create like these beautiful product ideas and help also give you the signal that when you are making big long-term R&D investment bets, that they're going to pay off because the customers asked you to build that for them, and they could quantify just how important that would be for their day-to-day lives, for their business operations, or for achieving their growth objectives. And that's just, it's really cool as both like a customer centric person, but also as like a technologist to think about it through that lens.
So well said. So much great insight and passion there. Is there a story or a moment that stands out for you in all the customer interactions you've had that you could share with our listeners? And you don't have to name names, of course, but something that really comes to mind for you.
There is. So I, when I was departing Salsify, it's funny what you do after working a decade at a company. And what I did my last week at Salsify was I went back to some of the first emails I ever sent and some of the first meetings on my calendar. And I found this deck that I shared with like a bunch of my colleagues at and everyone was getting a huge kick out of it. Cause like, could you imagine like your initial deck that you had built, not even at its rapid, but at your first company is like, you look at it back 10 years later and you're like, oh, did I really do that? Like, this is crazy. And so I was looking through the deck and laughing, and I found that the email that I had shared the content ahead of time. We were going to be presenting to like 60 people. It was my first customer on site, traveling down to do like a real big presentation around what we've implemented, what it's going to do, how it's going to change the jobs to be done. And what the email I received back was simply said, never has a vendor been so inside my head that they could write down exactly what I would have written down and wanted to present. And then in all capitals, thank you. This is going to be so much fun. And so like that's the stuff that you kind of look back at it and it's like you've gone through this huge, journey. And I'm curious if you feel this way, but working in technology feels a little bit like dog years. Like I very much feel like I had a full and healthy career of 70 years in my 10 years, right? But you go back to those like initial moments of like, wow, I think I might actually have a little bit of competency in what I'm doing, and I might have an approach that could work for others too.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I love those moments when you meet with the customer and there's a meeting of the minds, and you've kind of been through the journey together, and now you're doing real work, and it's so much fun. It's so rewarding to see. Now, you had a great run at Salsify, amazing, something to be incredibly proud of. You've recently departed, as you mentioned, and you've got an exciting new company, Lettuce Commerce. Tell us about what you're up to.
I really appreciate that. So there's two origin stories for the name of the company. There's the first origin story, which is the one that my kids tell. And so I have two boys that play hockey, and they have long hair. And in the hockey world, when you have long hair that flows out the back of the helmet, they call it lettuce. And I'm sitting in the car, driving a carpool full of, five hockey kids. And one of the kids goes, how's lettuce going, Joe? I said, it's pretty good. Like, it's starting, it's going. And they're like, you named that after us from driving us, right? And so that's the first origin story. Is I've got a bunch of carpool kids who are convinced that lettuce is about the hockey hair culture. But the real story is I knew that I wanted to co-found a services company, and I wanted to do it with some fun involved. And so lettuce is really a way for us to go into any conversation where we can be consultative and do discovery with a customer, and where appropriate, say, Why don't you let us help you with that? It's as a services company. That's really the background for it. And there's another part of it too. And like the color patterns and the green and like the, just thinking about renewed growth. For me, any good technology investment that a company makes should be measured in how much it helps an organization grow their people, grow their efficiencies, grow their top line, grow their bottom line. And so there's a part of this where when partnering with Lettuce, we want to make a commitment to our customers to help enable growth.
Now, Salsify has a huge ecosystem now. We're thrilled to be a Salsify partner, obviously, at It's Rapid. And I believe you had something to do with that, Joe. So thank you for that. Are you thinking about Salsify exclusively? Are you thinking about other big e-com technology vendors? How do you think about the space?
So this is one of the really cool things. And, absolutely, we're so excited to be part of Salsify or continue to be part of Salsify from the outside looking in. It's an amazing ecosystem with amazing customers, partners, technologies that are being built and around and integrated with. It's awesome. But the niche that I found in the last few years, looking from the outside in, working with other technology companies, is, when you're doing retail syndication, a retailer is setting the requirements and a brand has to meet them. When you're building your own technology stack or you're building your own commerce platform, you're setting those requirements. And so often, we saw brands get their content to Amazon and get their content to Walmart and get their content to international marketplaces. But there was a struggle with feeding their own brand sites. And there's amazing technologies, Shopify, Salesforce, Commerce Tools, BigCommerce, Adobe Commerce. There's so many amazing tools out there. But for some reason, a PIM and a commerce platform, their customers were struggling to get value. And so the niche that we identified was, hey, why don't we focus on omnichannel commerce with a real lens of building those world-class content experiences and product detail pages for brand sites and for direct-to-consumer and for this massively emerging B2B vertical, and have those shopping experiences be same world-class with amazing content that you're getting on retailer sites. And so we're building out partnerships across the ecosystem, really on anywhere and everywhere that a consumer will shop. We want to partner with world-class technologies that are helping to drive those experiences. I mean, the mobile hero images that It's Rapid are helping customers make, right? Those are driving conversion. And, that your technology is doing it in a way that allows brands to create those images at scale. And that's super important. And that fits so well into the ecosystem. That's how we're making our partnership decisions, but it all fits in that niche of content everywhere, world-class content everywhere.
World-class content everywhere. It's a great way to be thinking about it. Tell us, if you would, about the team, who you've got, and I'm guessing you've got some customers you're working with. I don't know if you can tell us who they are, of course, but maybe you could give us a hint.
The team is amazing. And I'm lucky to have co-founders in Dave Simel and John Epicella that I had worked with at Salsify for a number of years. Dave was my partner in crime and really the technologist part behind our technology relationships. He goes in and he deeply understands and consumes what the best solution or best end-to-end architectures will be for customers when multiple technologies are involved. John Epicella was someone who I hired back at Salsify 8 years ago, and he's rapidly grown personally, professionally to be an incredible peer of mine. John built Salsify's GDSN data pool. John oversaw Salsify's PIM and data model. And there's no one in the industry that has as much of a deep experience of how technologies can work and bend. And you look at them like a cube and manipulate them to take the data and transform it to meet any of those other endpoint requirements. that will create those world-class content experiences. We have other folks on the team that have Salsify experience, both from at the organization, but also from the customer side. The customer side for us is just such important perspective to have, because when we're going in and we're consulting, there's nothing like being able to go in and say, I understand where you're at. I understand where you're trying to go. This is hard. This is complex. This is hard to articulate if your organization's never done it before. Let us help.
An easy message, a hard problem. You've got the team to solve it. So super excited for you. I want to take a step back, pick your brain for a minute, and look at the space broadly. This HIM environment ecosystem has obviously really evolved in the last decade. Where are we in that journey, and how should we be thinking about the next few years?
It's amazing when you look at technological evolution on a multi-year scale, right? Like, I view this category specifically. It really relates all the way back to almost master data management systems that had a product domain as a component. Then that was that way for a long time. Then with the birth of GS1 standards and GDSN, there was a need for standalone systems for product informations, and that's where the PIM category was created. And that existed for a decade or more, just as a standalone. Hybris came along and said, why don't you embed a commerce front end onto this? And why don't we evolve the category to PCM? And why don't we allow you to both manage product information and build websites from one suite? And then Salsify came on not that much longer, probably only a handful of years later, and said, well, why stop at websites? Let's get content everywhere and create a product experience management. And I think that the category from that lens is at the early years of truly driving omni-channel commerce and really being a command center. I've had a couple customers who actually refer to it as a heartbeat. Content comes in, it gets reoxygenated, it gets re-energized, and it goes back out. And that's done in a little bit of a manual way today. But imagine what the next 10 years will look like with the innovation of AI tools, the innovation of ML tools, and what can come in to really get that flywheel that's now, it's moving, but to really accelerate that flywheel and get the heart rate starting to really, really pump out good content, better content, more personalized content, better experiences. And so as much as the consumer demands the innovation and demands more information, the next 10 years of PIM is going to make sure that you're not only meeting the requirements, but you're not slowing down the product innovation process or the new product introduction process as part of that. That's really what it's going to be. I think we're going to see more products coming to market from more brands across more channels in an even faster way. And that's super exciting, because for brand manufacturers and for retailers, that means growth. That means catching up to these retailers that have million product, tens of million, hundreds of million product portfolios. We all know which ones those are. And how do you increase your catalog and your surface area to have more products that are going to meet what Joe Gaudreau or Dave Feinlieb are looking for, when we open up our phone in the morning or in the afternoon?
We've got a great set of predictions for the next 10 years. You've got a super exciting new venture, Lettuce Commerce. Really thrilled to hear about it. Joe, I'd love to take a few minutes before I let you run. I've got a rapid fire set of questions if you're up for those.
I love it. Let's go.
All right. So first off, and I know it's hard to choose only two, but which two people have inspired you the most in your professional life?
Oh, that is a tough one. I'm gonna give my two paternal grandfathers the credit here. So I'm grounded in two ways. My grandfather on my mother's side was an entrepreneur. He had a number of small businesses that he ran, and as a youth, I was able to go with him on trips and actually help him. Remember ever going into a pizza shop and playing an arcade game? Right? He had hundreds of those spread across the New England area, and I would go with him, and we would count the coins and collect the coins, and we would split with the owner and give him his percentage, and we'll take our percentage and we'll move on to the next one. We'd repair machines. We'd bring in new machines. And so I was doing this from when I was 4 or 5 years old through high school. And so for him, professionally, I was inspired by his dedication to wake up before the sun rose every morning and go out and build a business for himself that would provide for the family. And so I have that inspiration. And the second person would be my grandfather on my father's side. And this is kind of my spiritual really inspiration. So my grandfather was in the Air Force. He was a police officer for a number of years. And when he retired from the police force, he became a deacon. And so my experience with him was always as Deacon Bob, going to mass, dedicating his life to service, dedicating his life to volunteering, dedicating his life to helping others. The first computer I ever built by hand was with him as we were assembling all of the different components because he wanted to donate computers to the underprivileged youth in his community. And so I had these amazing, just inspirational personalities in my life that 100% affect who I am personally and professionally today.
Joe, such great sources of inspiration. And I got to tell you, it took me back there to building an 8086 on a piece of plywood back in the day. So some great memories from that and from family. When you do get time away from work, if you do get time, you're just starting out with Lettuce Commerce here, so I imagine it's not too much time. But what do you like to do outside of work and family?
There isn't a lot of time outside of family because I have 3 boys, the 2 older of which are very active in youth sports. And I was given the advice by a friend when they were just entering school age that the only way to slow down time is to volunteer for everything. I had never skated before in my life. I learned how to skate so that I could be an assistant coach on my kids' hockey team. I volunteer in baseball. I volunteer in soccer. So I spend a lot of time volunteering in youth sports. But I do get to get away. My wife permits me to get away about once a year. And my favorite hobby is fly fishing. Turning off the phone, staying away from technology, reconnecting with nature, and going to some of the most beautiful places our country has to offer and experiencing nature and experiencing camaraderie with some family and friends.
So important. What a great message. Joe, if listeners want to get in touch with you, they want to find out more about what you're doing at Lettuce Commerce, what's the best way for them to reach you online?
It's a real tough email. It's joe@lettucecommerce.com. I'm also all over LinkedIn, so please, by any means, hit me up on email, connect with me on LinkedIn through Dave. It'd be a pleasure. I love talking shop with folks. So does not at all have to do it. If it has anything at all, to do with e-commerce, I'd love to chat.
Well, Joe, it's always a pleasure. We'll make sure to include a link to Lettuce Commerce in the show notes with your contact info. So much fun talking with you today. I always enjoy our conversations, especially on the pod today, but throughout our partnerships together. And I hope you'll come back again soon.
I think we're going to have some stuff to talk about, and we might have to do this again. So I'm excited. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for the amazing work that you and your organization are doing to really deliver world-class content experiences to consumers across the globe. What you're doing is, really special. And so thanks for having me on. And I'm excited for what the future has for all of us.
Thanks, Joe. I hope you enjoyed today's show. Beyond the Shelf is brought to you by It's Rapid. It's Rapid is the platform Pepsi, Sierra Nevada, Revlon, and hundreds of other leading brands and retailers use to build personalized content at scale. Whether that's images, videos, or product descriptions for their product detail pages, shoppable videos or banners for their digital ad campaigns, or sell sheets for sales enablement, brands that use It's Rapid are able to produce high-quality, on-brand content on average more than 80% faster than category competitors. To find out more, please visit itsrapid.ai. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Beyond the Shelf.